Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Linda Lovisa, and I'm in my studio today. And I am going to be doing a birch tree demonstration. And I think that they are probably the most popular tree to paint. And here is my reference. So I've talked about references before where I do a lot of hiking and I've always got my camera with me and I'm always taking pictures of things that I love to paint. And birch trees, of course, is one of them. It's probably the most popular tree that people love to paint. They're just so pretty. So I chose a summer scene because we're sort of spring is in the air, and as you can see, I've got some beautiful hyacinths in my studio today. They smell amazing. And what I've done on my canvas is I've done a little bit of preparation so I can get right to the trees right away. I gave my canvas a yellow tonal wash. I've talked about the tonal wash before, where you just give your canvas a color to get started and sketch into. So I did that earlier. I've also given the birch tree itself a wash of burnt crimson, which is another favorite color of mine from TriArt. It's such a beautiful color. Now, the reason why I've given my tree a burnt crimson is I want to show you a couple of things. There are a lot of pinkish tones in this birch tree, and you can see those very peachy, really pretty tones. Now, you know, most people think that birch trees are perfectly white with black markings because, you know, that's what we sort of associate a birch tree with. But they are actually way more colorful than you imagine. So here's one example. This is what I'm going to be working on today, but I'm going to give you a few other examples. Now here's another photo that I took of birch trees, and here again you can see how different this stand of birch trees is compared to the one that I just showed you. And there's a lot of color in here. And here is another one. This is in the fall, and look at how pretty that is. I thought about doing this one too, but maybe some other time. But the colors are much lighter in this particular one. So here are some examples of different birch trees that you can see various colors in the trees themselves and how they really have a different feel. Now I love this one here because of the way that the bark is curling on this one, and that's the one that we're going to be working on. So those are some examples, and you know, really, they're a tree with so much variety. So let's get started. I'm not going to really work on the background today, a lot on the background. Really, I'm going to focus on the tree itself. So I've got my burnt crimson tonal wash on the tree already, and I'm going to add a little bit more. So I'm going to use a wider brush. I'm using a bristle brush, by the way, so that I can deposit some color on there. And let's start with the burnt crimson. Now it's a really gorgeous color. Like, you can see how beautiful that color is. Yeah, it's gorgeous. Now you're probably thinking, why would you want to start with such a color? Well, it's going to give me those really beautiful pinky tones that I'm looking for in the tree, and that's what I'm going to start off with. I'm going to start off by blocking that in. So there's a little bit of the bark that peels out here. So I'm going to do that and bring that color down, and there's a few more pieces over here. Now, when I'm doing something like this, I'm really, you know, trying to, you know, interpret it in my way, of course, being an artist, being a painter, and depositing the burnt crimson first. And I'm going to add yellow, our light yellow, deep to it. And you would think that having the pyrrole orange on my palette today because of an earlier exercise, I would use the pyrrole orange. But I know that the pyrrole orange is not going to give me quite the color that I'm looking for. So I'm using the burnt crimson instead. And there we go. Now, did you know that all of the branches on birch trees are always dark? So they're a really, almost like a really dark charcoal gray color. So I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to that branch. So I'm picking up the ultramarine blue, same brush, I don't need to rinse it, and I'm going to deposit that first. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of that burnt crimson just because I've added it up here, so why not bring in a little bit of that burnt crimson in here as well. Now my background, when this painting is completed, will be much lighter. It'll have, you know, the lighter colors of the leaves, and if I have time today I may, you know, bring in a few, but really my main focus is here. And there's some dark markings up here, so I'm going to use the burnt crimson and the ultramarine blue for this marking up here. And I'm not going to overblend it. And I'm going to bring that color down here. So the light in this particular painting is kind of dappled light because it was in the forest, and you know how the leaves and any little bit of a breeze will change the light on the trees that you're looking at. And you can see that there are some shadows here in the lighter area here, and I'm just going to bring in that shadow in where that little part of the bark where it's peeling. I'm just adding ultramarine blue here. And of course the markings would be the very last thing that you would add, because you need to develop what's underneath those markings before you start to add the markings. So I'm just going to bring that down here because there's a piece of bark that's peeling off here. You might not be able to see that all that great on the camera, but there we go. So now I'm just going to bring in a few little swatches here and there just to show where some of the shadows are hitting. And there we go. More paint on my brush, obviously, because it's doing this. So when it's doing that, that means that I really need to pick up paint. And even though I want to go into it very lightly. So we've got another piece of bark. So we've got a piece of bark that's curling up over here and then down. And then there's a shadow here. I've got another piece of bark that's kind of turned in this way. So this one kind of goes like this and turns this way. Now I'm going to load up another brush with white and cerulean blue. So I've got both colors on there, and I'm just going to indicate where that piece of bark comes out, and it does something like this. And you're probably wondering, why would you use white and cerulean blue? It looks pretty white to me. Well, you'll see how that all works out, because there's so many different colors in the shadows that when you're first depositing the paint for your tree, you want to make sure that you're depositing a variety of colors before you start to add the white. So now I'm picking up more of that yellow Arlide Deep and a little bit of the burnt crimson, and I'm adding it over here. And so I'm just going to show you what adding the white to this combination does. Now the lightest part of my tree is over here, but this is the shadow part underneath here. So I'm just going to feather this out. And this is where, you know, the exploration of color really comes in when you're exploring new colors or colors that you have in your paint box. It's really important to explore so that when you're depositing color, that you know what colors you're going to end up with. And it becomes instinctive, by the way. Now you can see some of those nice peachy tones that I'm getting, which is great. And I can just, you know, tap some extra color here for that shadow area, picking up more paint. So I just picked up a little bit more white, and I'm going to pull that in. And I'm also going to go up here a little bit. More paint on that brush. Need to really load it up. So that's ultramarine blue and the burnt crimson. This is going to be darker than what I need. And loading up this brush with white, and I'm also going to load up this brush with some white as well, and a little bit of parchment white, so that when I cut into here, I'm going to get the right color here. I have this a little lower. Bring that up. And add a little bit more. And some of the light yellow, deep. Beautiful shadow color. I want this to be a little bit more in the yellow. Even though it's in the shadow area, I want it to be a little bit yellower than bluer. Tap my brush so I'm getting a nice edge. Picking up Arlide Deep with the Pyrrole Crimson, so it's double loaded. And I'm just going to give it a touch here, like so, and over here too. Bring that color down a little bit. And pick up more white. Bring it over nice and there we go. Pulling the color over. And you're really just playing with all those beautiful warm and cool grays, really. such a pretty color. Stepping back for a moment. More of the Arlide yellow with the burnt crimson. Bringing that in over here. Cerulean blue with the white. And a little bit more white. So this is the titanium white that I'm using. There we go. Pull that over like that. And bring it over here as well. Some of the bark that's peeled off. Adding more of the white with the cerulean blue and pulling that color over. And a bit more of the cerulean blue. Let's pull this in. And cerulean blue and the burnt crimson. Stepping back. More white. When I look at this reference, I can just feel that light breeze in the forest. It's just such a nice feeling when you're out there exploring. So this is the warm white that I've added to this piece of curling bark. This needs to be a little bit darker right here, so I'll just give it a tap. And that needs more paint, that brush. So back to the burnt crimson and the ultramarine blue. It's starting to take shape. And you're probably thinking, it still doesn't look like a white birch tree to me. And you're absolutely right. Because birch trees have way more color in them than meets the eye. when you really take a look at different species of trees like I do, you really start to notice the difference. Picking up a little bit of warm white with the yellow Arlide deep, because I want to capture the light hitting that tree by adding a little bit of the yellow to my paint. I'm making the white appear whiter, actually, in a way, or adds to the brightness. Now, depending on where you're working, you might want the white to be a little bit cooler, so I've picked up a little bit of the cerulean blue up here as I'm tapping that in. More white. Now a little bit more of that yellow Arlide deep with the white, and a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of the the burnt crimson, just a very, very small amount, just to bring the light here. There we go. So that pinky color underneath, right here, is part of the color of the tree where the bark has peeled away. Using a really light touch there. Set that brush down. Picking up the titanium white. Start to bring that color over. More of the warm white with the Arlide yellow. Now remember that this is still part of the underpainting, because I still haven't got this completely blocked in yet. There'll be more whites added to this here shortly. And then, of course, the markings also get added. Just picked up a little bit more of that white, the titanium white. That too light there. Just a touch of white, add it to that brush, giving me that purpley gray color. Stepping back. Oh, I picked up some of that pyrrole orange. There we go. Bring that in there. Work a little bit quicker here, just to get this tree in. I want it to block in a little bit of that background for you, just a tiny bit. But we'll see how far we get here. And of course, this will not be anywhere near completed during this little demonstration, but it will give you an idea on when you're depositing color, that you're starting to blend the color as you go along. And there's a lot of layering that happens afterwards. So let's do a little bit more here. And notice how I'm using my brush and I'm curving my stroke to give that tree that three-dimensional look so that it doesn't look flat. Now I've got some warm colors there. I want to add some cool, so I'm going to use the cerulean blue. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, that's way too much blue. Not when you blend it. Look at that beautiful gray color. Warm gray, nice warm gray. So next time you're out in the woods, really take a look at those birch trees and see how many different colors that you can find in the tree. And I think you will be pleasantly surprised as to how many colors are in an actual birch tree. Now this is just a start. A lot of work to do still, but That is the fun part about painting. It's not about rushing through something. It's about enjoying the process. Yeah, because if it was just about, you know, painting it and getting it done, what fun is that? Like for me, the actual painting process is working with color and enjoying all the different steps in between. Just a little bit of a shadow there and here, there, stepping back. Now it's starting to take shape. I love this part when things are starting to come together. Now I can start to add the lighter colors because that's what's really going to bring this tree, make it come to life. Notice when I'm cutting in the colors, how I'm leaving some of the underpainting showing through. So it's not, it's glowing through. There we go. Bringing some of that a little bit closer there. Just tapping the color on. I'm using the titanium white at the moment. And I'm just going to add a bit more paint to this peachy brush and bring in, I'm going to call it my peachy colored brush. Bring in the light on here. A little bit more of the yellow. Feather that in. And up here too. And over here. Bring in some of that white in there. And I do cover birch trees in my classes quite often, in my online classes. And this is just a small example. So you can check out my website as to when those are coming up. And there's so many different things so many different steps. Bring that color down here a little bit more. There's a lot more texture here. Don't know whether I can put a little bit of that in there so that you can see how that would work. So all I'm doing is I'm just rolling my brush in here like this. And then I'm going to take my, lighter colored brush and just kind of hit and miss in between some of those markings. Put my glasses on to see if I'm actually doing this right, the way I want. There we go. Just bring a little bit of this in here. And the brushes that I've been using today are, it's a mix of bristle and synthetic, just in case you're wondering. And brushes are a very individual choice, so it just depends on what you like to use. And unfortunately, there's no real trick to picking out brushes, because everyone has a different touch and requires a different style of brush, I guess you could say. So what I really love might not necessarily be the same brand that you really love. It's all about your touch. And the only way to discover that is to, you know, purchase different brushes at different times and experiment with the touch. It's kind of like a signature in a way. And when you find a series of brushes that you really love, then that's when you go out and you buy multiples. Now this painting has a very long way to go yet. But it's starting to come to life. And oh, it's such a difficult time to stop at this point. But I have like a lot of little things to do in here and in the background. But why don't I just bring a couple of leaves in the background for you, just so that you can see what that actually might look like. So, because that's going to make all the difference. Now I'm just going to offload this brush over here and set that in there, and this one too. There we go. I usually like to pick a spot in my painting when I'm about to stop painting for a while, and I like to just offload. This is what I call offloading my brushes. No sense, you know, dumping all that paint away when you can just, you know, deposit it on your canvas somewhere. There we go, done. Now let's get another brush ready here. I'm going to use ultramarine blue and the yellow medium. And I'm just going to bring in a few abstract shapes back here, just so you can see how that's going to change things. And I might as well bring in a little bit of blue back there too. So this is the white with manganese blue. So as Bob Ross used to say, when I was a child, I used to watch Bob Ross, and who hasn't? Somewhere for the little birds to fly through. That's one of his comments that has stuck with me. So those little sky openings. There we go. Bob Ross, you are still alive with many of us. And there we go. Bring just little openings there. I mean, I'll bring more in at a later date when I go back into this painting, but I'm just going to bring in the suggestion of leaves. And the reason why I did the tonal wash in behind dark green is so that I have a variety of greens for my background. Now I'm not going to touch these openings because it's going to change the color of my green, but this will give you a little bit of an idea on how I'm going to tackle the background and how much of a difference it makes when you start to bring things in. Now, ordinarily, I would be working the whole painting at the same time, where I'm developing the background, the foreground, the middle ground, and I'm touching different areas throughout the painting. But because I wanted to just focus on the birch tree today, just to give you a little bit of an idea on how I approach it, everything else is sort of at a certain stage that it should be more developed. It should be developed as much as the birch tree is at this point. but our focus today was the birch tree, and I hope you enjoyed it. Well, I'd like to thank you today for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. And you can go to my website to find out more about my classes and, of course, about myself as well at lindalovisaartcanada.ca. Thank you.